Hello YouTube Pipers, Double O Pipe here, aka Rick. I noticed I hadn't been on here in quite some time. And to be honest, I haven't smoked my pipe in a while. So maybe that's why I haven't been on. Because usually whenever I light up the pipe, I get the hankering to talk to the glass. Cup of cha, Bing's favorite, and Rick's favorite. Temperature outside's 80 degrees. Winter. I went out, excuse me, and worked in the yard some more. Today I worked in the yard, not yesterday because it was cooler yesterday, but I worked in the yard the day before yesterday. You have to excuse me, I got a frog in my throat I can't get rid of. Didn't do a whole lot, but worked about an hour, maybe hour and a half. I'm too old to feel like I got to do it all in one day like I used to. But I've gotten a bit of the debris cleared up, and next warm spree, I'll go out there and mow the yard. Of course, there are a couple of trails I don't have to mow anymore because that's where Hunter walks out to take care of his business, and he's got trails running over to the fence and down the fence and back. He doesn't believe in being outside. I've been thinking about my mother. Her birthday was last month. And then I remembered an incident that makes me realize how much God plays a part in your life. My mother used to hang the clothes out on the clothesline out there. Dad had rigged up a couple of lines so that she could dry clothes on the line and get that everyday freshness into the clothes, whereas you don't get that in a dryer. Of course, you also get bird poop on it on occasion. Which I guess was one of those things that you didn't worry about, you just accepted. But she went out there one morning. I was trying to remember if I think I was 11 when this happened. She walked out, she was hanging up clothes, and she came back in and she stepped on a nail as she was getting close to the back door. And like people did back those days, she picked up her foot, pulled the nail out, threw it in the trash, and just continued on her way. Well, she was limping a little bit. And it happened that that night I got sick. Used to get upper respiratory infections quite often when I was a kid. That's what it developed into. Well, as I got sicker, my mother limped more, walking around the house. And I happened to see a red line running up from her foot that was stabbed by the rusty nail, running up her calf. And it wasn't too long after I saw that my aunt came over and she was talking to me and my nose started bleeding. I used to get nosebleeds, but they would clear up. We'd just hold some ice up to the side here and it would help it to congeal so that it would clot. Not this time. The flow was pretty dramatic and it wouldn't stop. And after about an hour, after doing everything, you hold your nose, you put ice against the side of your nose, you hold your head back and swallow all that blood that's coming out. Ugh, I hate to think of it. It just wouldn't quit. So my aunt said to my mother, you might want to call the doctor and see if you can take him into the office, because I've never seen a nosebleed like this, especially with Ricky, because they usually clear up quickly. She called the doctor. This was back when doctors said, yes, come in now to my office. Not go to the emergency room and somebody will meet you there. Not any of that kind of stuff. This was my doctor that had treated me all my life said, come into the office right now. Well, nose bleeding. It's a little over an hour now that it had been bleeding. Got to the doctor's office and he took us right in, went to the back, asked how long this had been going on. He was used to me having nosebleeds, but not like this. And he said, Ricky, I'm going to have to pack your nose, looks like. I said, what do you mean? He said, I'm going to take this roll of gauze. It was about that thick. I mean, it was about that big around. And I'm going to have to pack all of this into your nose. I said, it won't fit. And he said, I'll make it fit because it's got to be in there tight. I said, geez. So he soaked it in saline and began to push it up into my nose. Blood coming down the whatever that thing was he was pushing it in with. And he packed every bit of that into my nose. And my nose was like out to here. Of course, it wasn't bleeding anymore because that stuff was packed in there. He said, there, that ought to do it. He said, I want you to come back in 3 days and let me take that packing out. So my mother said, fine. And I said, wait a minute, Doc. And this is where God intervenes in lives. I said, how about look at Mom? He said, what do you mean? What's wrong? And she said, oh, nothing. He's just... And I said, her leg, look at her leg. See that red streak going up her calf? And he said, yeah, I do. That doesn't look good. Let me look at your leg. He said, have a seat. took off her shoe. Her foot was swollen, all red on the bottom. She had been limping around on this thing for several days now. Never complained. Never complained, my mother. And he said, "How long has this been like this?" And she said, "Well, I stepped on a nail 3 days ago." He said, "Ricky, it's a good thing you said something, because this could have been really bad for your mother." Excuse me. That frog just won't go away. So he looked at her foot and cleaned it up, dressed it, gave her an antibiotic, and said, "I want to see you in 3 days too. And if it gets any worse, if that line continues to move up and your foot doesn't go down, that swelling, I want you in here sooner." So she said, "Okay." So we went home. He had given me something for the upper respiratory problem and told me not to mess with that packing in my nose, which after 3 days started to dangle. I wanted to just yank it out, but my mother said, "Don't you do that. We're going back to the doctor today." So I said, "Okay." Well, that red line had faded away. It was no longer climbing up her leg, up her calf. And we went in, and he looked at her first and said he was pleased with how it had reversed itself. Then he came to me and he said, "Well, you ready to have that packing taken out?" And I went, "Yeah, I'm ready for it to come out." I sounded funny with all that stuff packed up in there. He said, "I see it looks like it's trying to come out on its own." I said, "Yeah, I wanted to yank it out." And he said, "Well, I'm glad you didn't." And so he grabbed it with his pliers or whatever they were and started pulling it out. And I swear it took 3 times as long to pull it out as it did for him to pack it in. And the longer it took, the more I could feel it way up in here. And finally, when he ripped it out like that, it just felt like my brain was being ripped out or something. I gagged. And he looked up in there. He said, "Looks fine. It's not bleeding anymore." I said, "No, I don't think it is." And we both went home knowing that seeing him had been a lifesaver, because he said he hadn't seen a nosebleed like that in a long time. And I'm still under the impression that it bled that much for that long so that my mother would take me into the doctor, so I would say just before we left, "Look at my mother's leg," which saved her a lot of problems, because she was never going to go to the doctor. So for me, my having to go and have my nose packed only meant that she was going to see the doctor. And that's why my nose didn't stop bleeding. I'll always believe that. Because my mother and my dad were of the old school where you didn't go to the doctor unless you were dying. She might have been in pain. She might have been hobbling around. But she wasn't dying. At least she didn't think she was. So she never would have gone to the doctor until she was laid up And it might have been too late then, for all we know. So I believe the good Lord acts in your life when you're too stupid to do something for yourself. I'll never forget that unpacking of my nose. It was it was almost like all that stuff had grown into the skin around where it was, and I'm surprised it didn't bleed whenever it was taken out. But boy, that was just, I don't know, that was worse than the feeling I had when they yanked the tubing that was down in my lungs way back when, and they pulled that out. I kept saying, trying to say, get this out of me. Every time the doctor would come, I would say, get this out of me. This was back when I had some ulcers that I had to have removed, or not removed. They went down in there and they cauterized them. But they had that tube down me. That was uncomfortable. That was a long time ago. Back in the 80s. Well, like I said, I was thinking about my mother, and that particular memory came up. And it just reminded me how he looks out for you when you're too dumb to look out for yourself. And the doctor told me it was a good thing I had said something, because it could have been very difficult for her if I hadn't, because she'd have walked out, she'd have limped out of there. And he was always so busy he wouldn't have noticed she was limping. So, man, I don't know where this frog came from, but it's just taken up residence. Even putting liquid down there doesn't help. Well, like I said, I haven't smoked a pipe in a while. I don't know why. I just haven't had the urge. And it's usually when I smoke the pipe that I want to talk to you guys and hope that you're having a pipe with me. And maybe a cup of cha. As my dad used to say, a cup of cha, Ma. And your favorite tobacco. And I have come to the conclusion that my favorite tobacco is Carter Hall. Don't know what else to say, so I'm going to hang it up, I think. I hope everybody's doing well. Hope you have plans for the weekend. I hope your weekend is like this, 80 degrees out. It's spring. It's soon. We're going to have the pine pollen just coating our cars. Another spring. I usually find that this bowl isn't big enough. I want a bigger bowl because I might have to light it a lot of times, but the smoke doesn't last as long as I would like. All right. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope you have good plans for the weekend. Hope they turn out fine. And let me just say, God bless you till the next time. Bye-bye.